So everyone can watch it later. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Happy Gay Pride, everyone. This is a great month to embrace everyone. And then we are going to explain today a concept of what is behind Gay Pride. And so we start with the wall of love and the color of the rainbow, which is a flag that includes everyone. Mohsen, you can go to the next slide. So, okay, go ahead. You can share, Mohsen.
Sam, you're muted.
I'm just double checking that everyone has made it on, because I know there's been some updates on the link. It's copying.
Perfect. Everyone is here, Sam. We are 25.
Okay, awesome. So Brad, if you're here, if you want to do a quick introduction, and then David after. I don't see Brad and David. So I see David. So David, if you want to do an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. I just got in the meeting there. Sorry. My name is David Murray. I am really excited to start with the team. Thank you so much. Everyone has been incredibly kind. My background is in education, specifically mathematical education. I worked as a teacher for a few years, and I've worked for a larger ed tech company, Prodigy Education. But I'm just looking forward to working with the BDR team, the sales team, and the Kritik team as a whole. So thank you so much. Everyone's been very kind.
Welcome on board. And I guess Brad is yet to join, so I guess we'll get him to introduce himself maybe at the end.
Yes.
Yep.
I think he's doing calls right now, so I'm just getting him jump in.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'm going. Who have already heard the concept of the genderbread person? No? Okay, great. So it's new for everyone. So interestingly, I recycled my assignment about the genderbread from my bachelor degree in psychology and sociology. So Kaston is going to look at me very accurately to make sure that I am very accurate. So first, I'm going to start with the definition of gender. Gender is a term used that is socially constructed and about the difference between female and male. And the meaning associated to it, oh, Brad has just arrived. The meaning associated to it is about the belief and the practice about the term femininity and masculinity. So gender, the way that we see in our current society is embedded in the image and idea and languages that we use in society. So especially in French language, I think a lot of people struggle with gendered for object as well, which is even more difficult. And so basically is virtually everything social in our life is gendered, and we can distinguish that. The society has a concept which is called gender role, and the gender role is about your attitude and behavior and activity that are socially defined, it is appropriate for each sex, and it's learned through the socialization process. So when you are living with your parents, you learn what is a male and female. When you are going back to school, you also learn a new definition of what does that mean to be a male and female. And so what happened is, like in the traditional setting, it could perpetuate, and it had done, gender inequality. So the genderbread is giving you a new belief system that we are all together as one person, and with some differences, but we are all similar. And those differences are based on 4 categories. The first one is the gender identity. And then the gender identity is how an individual perceives himself or herself or itself. Then there's a gender expression. It's about how they experience themselves using physical appearance, about with clothing or materials. And then there's also the fourth one is, the third one is biological sex, is how a person is born and genetically formed. And the fourth one is what kind of attraction do you have toward another person? It's like, or toward another, sometimes it could be object as well, but is what a person is sexually aroused by and drawn to. Okay, so this is a spectrum, and so sometimes the only one who is related to the sexual diversity is biological sex. And this one has three categories, which is, one is man, the second one is female, and the third one is intersex. So the male born, of course, as you know, is something longer, and then the female, as everyone knows, but the intersex is sometimes some people born with sexual anatomy that is genetically different. And the reason is because there is some chromosomes who are developing sexual attribute and phenotypes, as we called, that impacts the breast formation, as well as different structure from the sexual part. Great. And then, so any question about how the gender bread is represented so far? No? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to explain a little bit two concepts, and then I will pass on the voice to Kaston. So the first one that I want to expand on is the gender identity. So gender identity is a subcategory of woman, man, two-spirit, genderqueer, and genderless. So this is where we can differentiate people from identity. And then in the gender expression, the subcategory is butch, female, androgyne, gender neutral, and hypermasculine. So the butch is a term to define men and women who express themselves with masculine manner. Female or femme is used to express feminine manner. Androgyne is feminine and masculine exhibition from a person, which is independent independent of their biological sex. The gender neutral is the opposite of androgyne. It expresses any female and male attributes, and is more is like agender. And the last one is hypermasculine, is like expression of masculinity that dominates femininity. So that's it. I would like to just share that with everyone, that we are all part of the same Genderbread in the month of the Gay Pride. And I think this is something that resonates with me the most, to consider myself part of the Gay Pride family by exploring my gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and sexual orientation. And Kaston, the stage is yours.
So yeah, so I put together this image just from a while ago. So well, this is all educational, obviously. I mean, I'm not by any means educated on this, this whole Pride and all the science behind or stuff that Karen said, but I'm exploring, and I'm been very fascinated by this whole month of Pride. Well, I'm going to share a story. I was born in June myself, so the month of Pride. So Karen and I, a few years ago, we participated in the Pride. So we kind of dressed up, and then we went to this Pride, which is fun. I met Dr. Kaston, who actually one of the early adopter of Kritik. I met him, at top time, and I never actually met him in person until I went to MSU, Michigan State University. It was a very amazing experience. I saw Kaston coming in his office with high heels, with nice expression, as Karine just mentioned, the feminine expression. And I really was delighted to have the conversation with Kaston at the time. We obviously didn't talk much about the gay pride and all this stuff that's going on, but I thought that it was a good opportunity for us to bring one of our current customers and current Kritik users, who's a professor in psychology, to help us basically learn a little bit about the whole movement of LGBT. So yeah, maybe Kaston, you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit what you think about the slides that Karine presented.
Because of course I'm muted. So thank you, Mohsen. Merci beaucoup, Karine. I really appreciate that. I think you did a wonderful job, showing how gender identity and sexual orientation, how they go hand in hand, but they're also separate. So a lot of people think that, for example, that a person cannot be trans and gay, for example. It's like they're related, but they're two separate things. And so I appreciate how everything was described. When it comes to what the beauty of the Genderbread or the Genderbread image is that it really shows the diversity, not only in gender identity, but also in gender expression and sexual orientation. And it shows that sexual orientation and biological sex are different. And a lot of people do think that there are only two sexes, and it's like, no, there are way more than two biological sexes in the human species. Just like there are at least 14 different biological sexes in certain animals and plants. So why can't the same be true for humans? When we look at gender identity, and sexual orientation and gender identity are still constructs that we're learning so much more about. In the 1950s, Dr. Kinsey did his research in sexual attraction, sexual behavior. And one of the things that he and his colleagues found was that about 10% of the population, or 10% of humans, are exclusively attracted to the opposite sex. 10% of humans are attracted to exclusively the same sex. So that's like 80% of us are somewhere in the middle. And that's okay. That's the beauty of it. And we look at orientation, behavior, and attraction. They are different, but they all make up attraction, behavior, and thoughts, like same-sex thoughts, they all make up our orientation. So a person they may identify as, or they might be romantically attracted to someone who is the same gender or the same sex, but they may have never engaged in same-sex activity. That doesn't make them heterosexual if their orientation is toward a person of the same gender or the same sex. They are still part of the LGBTQIA2+ community. So it's not just about behavior. And so a lot of people might say, oh, well, and we see this a lot with people who identify as bisexual or pansexual. Oh, well, you're with somebody who presents as the opposite sex, so you must be straight or you must be heterosexual. It's like, no, just because a person is with a partner or partners who might not share the same gender identity as them, that doesn't negate or dismiss or discount their sexual orientation. And so it's important to remember that. And so that's why when we talk about these issues, it's important for us to understand that the way a person might present their gender expression might not be the same as their sexual orientation or their gender identity. I like a good pair of heels. I ain't gonna lie. I'll put on a good pair of heels and strut my way across that campus like I am the baddest thing Michigan State University has ever seen. I paint my nails because, thank you, Courtney, as I should. And I dare somebody to tell me I don't look good. You know, I paint my nails. Does that mean that I am trans? No, I'm a cisgender male. I identify with the sex that I was assigned at birth. And that's what cisgender means. But my gender expression is more androgynous. And I like that. I mean, I wear earrings. If like I would absolutely go pump gas in a caftan with heels on, my hair tied up, and hoop earrings. And dare somebody to say something. And so that's just gender expression. You know, there are cis men who, there's this guy in Germany. He's an engineer. Like, to see him, you wouldn't know that he wears, his professional attire is like a blazer with a pencil skirt and heels that I want. You would never expect that. He's a cis man. He is married with kids. He identifies as heterosexual, but he likes to blend, he likes to disrupt what society says is men's or women's clothing. And so, in the words of the great philosopher RuPaul, we are all born naked. The rest is drag. And it's true. Society in this gender, these rigid gender and patriarchal ideas of what is and isn't appropriate for people based on how they present as far as their gender. You know, we've gotten locked into these ideas of, oh, well, your boys should wear this color, girls should wear that color. And so now we're understanding a lot more about gender identity, about sexual orientation, gender expression, and thankfully we're getting away from that. There is a theory that's been developed about the 2015 or so it's rather new, and it's called sexual configurations theory. So it takes sexual orientation and pushes it even further. So this theory argues that people who identify as kinky, for example, that's a sexual orientation. It's a sexual identity. It's not just a behavior. So people who are into spanking or nipple clamps and, you know, who like flogging and like candle play and all these other things that might be considered kinky and deviant, that's a normal expression of a sexual identity. And so even people who might say, oh, well, I'm heterosexual because I identify as, or I am attracted to people of the opposite sex or the opposite gender, what have you. If, according to this theory, if they identify as kinky, that's a sexual identity. That challenges the heteronormative ideas of sexuality that have been perpetuated throughout multiple cultures throughout human history. Interestingly, in a lot of indigenous cultures, and I'll speak from like African cultures, pre-colonization, it was seen as normal for to have trans women, trans men, people across the LGBTQIA2+ spectrum. In fact, there are societies, African societies, where trans women had all the legal rights of a cis woman. They were able to marry, they were able to own their own property, because in those societies, women owned their own property. They had all of the same rights, legal and societal rights and privileges of cisgender women. In other societies, gay men were the ones who cared for the orphans. So if the parents of a child died, a lot of times the gay male couples would step in and be the parents for those children. So this idea of heterosexuality and cisgender being the norm it's really not a norm. It's just one dot in the entire universe that is the beauty of sexual and gender expression and identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll stop right there because I can keep going on.
No, that was great. That was great. Obviously, a lot of things that I'm sure a lot of people didn't know. But I have one question. When we can ask people have questions, you can post it in chat or you can raise your hand. But to what extent do you think that these whole, whether you call it sexual identity, maybe, or orientation, because expression probably to me is different. But let's say orientation, I guess, or identification, how much of it is nurture versus nature? Like whether you're born, let's say, in a society which is, celebrates pride and, you're open and you talk about these topics, makes people kind of become more aware or identify themselves more as, as new gender diversity groups, or is all kind of nature?
This is the age-old question when it comes to psychology. Is it nature or nurture? The answer is almost always both. So what we know about gender expression and gender identity and sexual orientation is that there is at least a biological component. There may even be a genetic component. We're still doing research to determine, is it all genetic or partially genetic, or is there a genetic predisposition? But what we do know is that there is at least a biological component that happens before a child is born.
So I can give some illustration about what you said, Kaston, and I agree. And I will share a study that I read a long time ago. There were a gay couples who had a baby, and they did the study groups. The control group were heterosexual, and then the experimental group were heterosexual. And then they measure the size of the amygdala, which is the part of the brain who carry emotion. And then they figure out that in the control group, where the woman will have developed these organs bigger over time, and then which give her the childcare and this natural behavior of caring for a baby. And then the experimental group, which is the one of the men, had developed more this organ as well. And then that was the man who kind of developed the same organ as the female genetically, and then we're caring much more for the baby than the other one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have the research out there that's showing that there's at least this biological or genetic or some kind of component to it. And so a lot of times when people talk about their, like, one of the questions that I've gotten a lot is, well, when did you know? When did you know you were gay? If I had to really pinpoint it, I definitely knew at 6. At 6, I was like, yeah. Oh, yeah. And like with me, it was so evident. Everybody and their mama could have seen. That closet was way too small. I didn't come out until I was like, officially come out at like 20, but it was like, I look back at old pictures and I'm like, who was I fooling?
which is actually leads to the other question I had, which is like the confusion. Like, it looks like for you knew it at the age of 6. I don't even know what I was thinking when I was age 6. So I don't know how you were so assertive about that. But do you know, like, I guess, how much of this confusion is going on? And then what is the process for most? Maybe for you was easier, or is it always a process for people to get to that identification?
Yeah. So, and this is kind of where the nurture part comes in, like the environmental factors. So a lot of people will know that they are not cisgender or they're not heterosexual. When they know for themselves that they're not, there's usually, or there can sometimes be this, like, a crisis. in the sense that it's like, okay, society says I need to be this way, but I'm not. Now, how do is it possible for me to be my authentic self in a society that may not accept me or embrace who I am? And this is particularly true for people who are in intolerant families or in intolerant communities, where coming out might mean they're ostracized, they're kicked out of the family, or in some cases, they die. And so that nurture part, that can play a role in people's identity development as well. And some people might not ever come out. And for those people who don't want to ever come out, I would say, you know what? There is room in the community for you. You're still part of the community, whether you're out or not. Pride is for you as well. And so that's kind of where that nurture part comes in. And even though we've made a lot of progress and a lot of strides in visibility, there's still so much stigma around sexual orientation and gender identity. And there are, in the US, about 40% of LGBTQ plus youth are homeless because they came out to their parents and the parents kicked them out of the house. So we're talking like 4 out of every 10 LGBTQIA2 plus youth in the United States alone are homeless. And many of them have to turn to survival sex. And that is something that I've seen in my own work. Providing behavioral therapy for individuals who are addicted to various drugs. A part of many of their histories is survival sex due to being homeless because they were kicked out at a young age. So we're still battling this stigma and the intolerance. And that's part of what Pride is about, is bringing awareness that, yes, we're celebrating who we are. We're celebrating the beautiful diversity that is the human experience. We're celebrating our sexuality, whether you're, wherever you land on that spectrum, including kinky people. We're celebrating those identities, but we still recognize we have a long way to go. And a big part of Pride is increasing awareness, the educating, what we're doing here. This is all part of what Pride is about.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's very important because, not a lot of people knows that people get rejected. And the thing that I want to compliment on top of what you said is the fact that some people went to the therapy and then got medication to overcome homosexuality. Yeah. And I want to share to everyone, I don't know if you know, but there is in the medical field a book which is called DSMS. And this book mentions literally that this is a disease to be homosexual, and then they list the symptom and they list the type of medication that those medications should take. And they realized after so many years, took them a long time. I think it's the 5th version of the same book. They removed it. They removed that the homosexual is not a disease anymore. This is a natural phenomena of what we discussed today. So this is already a step in the medical area that started from there and extend.
Yeah, and so there's actually been a controversy that arose in the last couple of weeks. So we're on the 5th edition of the DSM, which it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, and it's published by the American Psychiatric Association. So in 1973, they removed homosexuality from the DSM. That was in DSM-3. So we're talking 1973, but even after that, there were researchers who were researchers into the 80s who were still publishing research and doing conversion therapy. even though it was removed as a diagnosis, they were doing conversion therapy on people who were LGBTQI2+. And many of these people went on to become presidents and past presidents of the American Society, no, the American Association for Behavioral and Contextual Therapy, Cognitive and Behavioral Therapy. So these are like big names in the field. One of these people actually developed acceptance and commitment therapy. It has come out that society, that association has published an apology for engaging in conversion therapy, even after it was removed from the DSM. And now there is a big push to force those researchers to retract all those papers. And it's a controversy that had ignited maybe a week or two ago, and it's raging. It's raging really, really big in that field.
And a very good point. Very good point. Thank you so much, Kaston. And then, I mean, I just want to share one line about Kritik here, because I'm doing right now my PhD in education. And so, you know, as you can see, even though there were no foundation for them to do those experimentation, they still publish the paper. And I hope, Kaston, that those papers will be removed. But what I would like to say is, what matters right now in our today's society is people to read those documents and then develop the critical thinking skills and never relied on one paper. Always go back to the source of the paper, who wrote it, what the foundation, what tools they have used, what method, try to just dig into it. And that's how I just want to say, everyone in this room, when we work with Kritik to develop critical thinking skills, is basically moving toward like a better society as a whole.
So well, I mean, officially we are into the time of 1, which is lunch time. So first of all, you know, I'm going to stay personally here because I have a couple of other questions that I want to ask. So feel free to stay here because we're going to still ask a few other questions. But if it's your lunchtime and you know you have to go, you have other things planned, feel free to just drop out. This is just a completely educational session for anyone who is really curious and interested in learning more. So we're going to continue for maybe another 10-15 minutes, if you guys are okay. Yeah, feel free to ask questions so that we can answer, because I think this is not going to be much of an opportunity to have this kind of conversation. But one other question I had from you, Kaston, before someone else maybe ask another question, would be related to this, I guess, parents and friends and peers, I guess, support system. So what do you think, especially for some people, I know that some of my friends have kids now, and I know that some of them, they have, you know, they didn't want to talk about it, but, you know, they just kind of say, oh, my kid says, you know, express this and that. So, but, you know, what kind of advice do you have, or what, you know, we don't have kids yet, but what do you think we should be aware of when it comes to, you know, hearing about a friends or someone in our family or in friends or colleague who might really be part of this group, and what we can do to support them?
So for parents, I tell parents, love your child regardless, because they're the same person. Now the parents are now given the honor of knowing their child even more, and knowing a new aspect of their child that they didn't know. So it's like opening a gift, and it's like you think the gift is one box, but then you open the box and it's like, oh wait, cool, there's another gift in here. That's kind of what it's like. And so for a lot of people, especially those who were raised in various cultures and various traditions where it's seen as wrong, I was raised in a tradition like that. The thing is that I have seen, and that's been helpful, is when parents love their child regardless, and start establishing that relationship of trust early on in that child's life, so that they feel comfortable sharing if they want to come out, it's not something that, the parents are the last to know, if ever. For colleagues, it's really helpful to, just be supportive. If you have questions, feel free to ask, but also do the work. We just like we can't rely on people. We don't want people to rely on us to tell them about, various aspects of our own culture. We shouldn't rely on them to tell us about, issues that are that the LGBTQI2+ community might face. So what I would recommend is, do some reading, listen. There are a lot of wonderful videos on YouTube. There are podcasts that are really good, where people are sharing their lived experiences. And, maybe that might be a jumping off point where you might, mention that to a colleague or a friend. And, that might open up the discussion where they might share their own experiences.
That's great.
I have a question, Mohsen, but is your question finished, Mohsen?
No, yeah, one last question I had, Karine, but I can ask it after your question. That's fine.
No, you can go. I will ask the last question after you.
So yeah, so I guess this question is really about organizations. I mean, you're part of a university, you're employed, as part of a university. I'm actually curious to know how Michigan State University has been receptive, I guess, to you or people like you to be a professors, because you go to the classes, obviously, you educate the next generations and all. Have you felt that the universities or organizations where you have been employed have been open to this, or have you felt a little bit, I guess, discomfort or any sort of pressure or anything to hide some of the aspect? That's one part. And then I guess, what do you think about, I guess, private corporations, if you have been part of what?
Yeah, so I have not felt that I had to go into the closet at MSU, because if I ever felt that, I would leave. I would up and leave with a quickness. MSU does have a long way to go when it comes to supporting non-cisgender individuals, whether they are, trans, agender, non-binary, what have you. MSU does have a long way to go. And I would say academia has a long way to go. For private corporations, I think one of the things that I think private corporations and companies can do is listen to those in the community. A lot of times, corporations, and when I say corporations in this case, I'm also talking about universities, because they tend to act like corporations.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll do things from the top down. Well, we think this, that, and the other about the community. This is what we're going to do. And it's like, well, did the community actually give any input? Are these things that are actually meeting their needs? Do corporations know what those needs are? Did they do the work and ask? What are the needs? How can we better support? And when corporations do that, they can build more sustainable, more robust, and more culturally responsive initiatives, programs, and things like that to support those in the community. And what ends up happening is when they do that, when they put in the work to support communities that have been historically marginalized and oppressed, what ends up happening is that everybody ends up benefiting. Because when it comes to equity, think of it like there's a ceiling effect. So when we talk about when we're talking about achieving equity or reducing disparities, we're taking that average or that gap and we're closing it. But as we're closing it, it shifts everyone up toward the ceiling. And that's what we want to do. We want to move everybody up toward that ceiling. And so that's one of the things that when I do consultations, when I teach about health disparities, that's one of the messages I try to drive home. Let's all, because when one oppressed group when they receive, everybody ends up benefiting.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. So I have my last question, unless someone else has a question in the group. But before I ask my question, I'm going to share a little bit of the story for context. So my dad had a very masculine behavior, and kind of like loved my mom to be very also feminine. But interestingly, when they were party, they like to be kind of like androgyne. So it's like my dad could have a party and play soccer with high heel, for example. And when I was a kid, I was watching that and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then, so therefore, I was like thinking that maybe Mohsen at some point could wear high heel from time to time as well. So my question is like, where do you think Mohsen can find the best high heel ever to wear?
So to answer that, I have a question. Mohsen, have you ever worn high heels?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay, so what we have to do is start you off with a kitten heel. Because we don't want you tripping or anything. Start off with a kitten heel. And interestingly, high heels were originally made for men, not women.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because it was seen as to show that the men were taller, which meant like more of a you have more stature because you're taller. So if you look at the photos of Napoleon Bonaparte, he's wearing heels.
Right. That's true. That's true.
High heels did not become associated with women until about the late 19th, early 20th century, but they were originally made for men.
Makes sense.
I think I remind us, I mean, don't quote me on that one, but I remind me that in France we had the king, and then I think some of our king were too short for the pictures, and then they had like a box for them, and then also like maybe potentially high heel as well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so Mohsen, I would not recommend you start off wearing the heels that I wear.
Right.
Because I'll rock some stilettos in a minute. So start off with wedges. And when you think about the size, take your size and go up by 2. And that's the conversion from your shoe size to women's.
Okay. Gotcha. So just much bigger. Bigger size. All right.
A question. Kaston, have you ever come up to Toronto for our Pride event, one of the biggest in the world?
I have not, but that is on the list.
Come visit us, cordially invited.
Look, let me tell y'all something. The way things are going in the US, it ain't, look, don't have me find a visa from somewhere. Do not have me find a visa, because the way these gas prices are, y'all, this country is a circus.
Yeah.
Much better, but
we're just gonna keep it real. This country is a circus.
You can walk with your high heel across the border.
Right? I mean, I literally live 2 hours from the Canadian border.
There you go.
And the way I drive, I can make it in an hour and a half.
We are changing the topic, but come here and then Mohsen and I will cook French food and Iranian food.
Look, I'm from Louisiana. I like to eat. And I need to practice my French anyway.
And I have a circus in my home as well. The hoop, the silk. So feel free to jump on it.
Okay, that was great.
Thank you so much, Kaston. That's going to be the closure funny moment for the event. Thank you so much, everyone, for being there, being open-minded, participating. Thank you all.
And honestly, if y'all ever want to talk with someone about, LGBTQIA2+ issues, you know what? I'm going to put my cell phone number in the chat. Just hit me up for real. Oh, wait, I have to put the country code. I forgot.
We all know, Kaston, that you don't answer your emails, only texts.
y'all know, y'all better text me, because
I'm like, Mohsen, you got to text Kaston.
I mean, because y'all know people stay emailing me from this university. I'm like, y'all emailing me about dumb stuff, and it's cluttering my inbox. Yeah, text me.
So are you more likely to respond to a text message
Oh,
if the display name is a female or is a male?
It don't matter. It don't even matter. It don't even matter. Just like when you text me, just if I don't have your number in my phone, just make sure you take, hey, this is such and such from Kritik. So I'm like, now who is this? Is this the student loan people? Yeah. But yeah, I will be in a faculty meeting texting, because those faculty meetings, I worry about the people. I say that now, and I'm going up for tenure in the fall.
Well, thanks for giving us this time generously, Kaston. Always, you have been giving us the time. We appreciate it, and we will look forward for another opportunity where we can have you again.
Absolutely. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Take care, everybody.